Good morning, everyone. This is the Leafs Convo podcast presented by Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, vanguardne.ca. I'm Norman James coming to you from London, along with my podcast partner in crime, Mike Augello, who is in Buffalo. We want to pour you a big cup of convo and get you ready for the day ahead. And, of course, the big climax tonight, the Leafs and Lightning in a huge game, a monumental tilt that might preview, well, I don't know, a second-round playoff series. We'll see. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Norman. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting match, and strangely enough, like last year when the Leafs didn't play the Sabres, I think until the second week in March. I think these teams have only played once. No, actually, they played both games in Tampa. They haven't played once in Toronto. They're playing the Leafs again the last game of the regular season. So it's going to be a test on home ice against the best team in the league. But there have been a little bit of signs that Tampa's, with 6 weeks or 4 or 5 weeks to go in the regular season, it's tough to keep up that competitive edge every game. So they may have a chance against them, but when we get to the playoffs, Tampa is so deep and so talented that, they have earned the legitimate crown in terms of being the favorite for the Stanley Cup.
Are we a smart fan base, Mike? And here I go. Are we a smart fan base? I think Leaf fans collectively are among the most savvy and understanding. And every team has its pocket of really omniscient and wise and sage fans. But what I'm finding a lot of right now with Leaf supporters is this hope, this fantasy that Boston and Tampa will blow their wads early through huge play in the regular season, and that all will be evened out by the time the Leafs find their game in the next, what do they play, 14? And they'll get to the playoffs, the Leafs will rise, and all of these other teams will come back down to reality. Mike, we have to tip our hat to not only what the Bruins have done, losing finally yesterday, but Tampa Bay is playing like with reckless abandon. Like, there is no time to waste. There is no time to spare. There's just one goal in mind, and that's winning a Stanley Cup. So maybe we should look at what's happening with Tampa right now, and then this game in particular, as soon-to-be king and the hopefully soon-to-be heir apparent in the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Well, you have to tip your cap to the Lightning. But the thing is that this is a team with sort of unresolved issues when it comes to the playoffs. As good as they've been over the last 4 or 5 years, they got to the conference final once. They got to the Stanley Cup final once. They haven't won.
It sounds to me like the ascent that you want to make, Mike. You want to take those steps. So the Leafs need to take those steps too. What I'm saying is, nobody has to sit back and enjoy Tampa's ride here. I've always talked about the Leafs changing history, interjecting and rewriting things. But let's face facts. Tampa has done remarkably well. And if the Leafs were in that position, I'm sure a lot of Leaf fans would look around and say, give us our just desserts because we deserve it.
Yeah, and the Leafs have a great and intelligent and talented fan base. Sting is a Leaf fan, so
I love the guy's the king, man. The police, come on, in their hay.
Yeah,
let's go.
But to your point, it's like, yes, if the Leafs were in the Lightning position, I have a feeling that Leaf fans would be understandably arrogant about their team because they'd be the best in the league, and that's only natural. But right now, I think the Leaf fans have to be looking at this team skeptically because right now, they play a game against Edmonton where for 58 minutes they were perfect. They're up 3-0. They shut down McDavid, and then in the final minute and 40 seconds, they lose their all concept of what they're doing. That's Zach Cassian almost tie the game. Clear break. That is the problem. They could be up, and not to bring back bad memories, folks, they could be up 4-1 in the third period of Game 7 against the Bruins at TD Garden this year, not 5-6 years ago, but this year, and still blow it because they have that in them still. And that's a product of the fact that they don't have a good enough defense. And over the last 2 games, they're playing the top 4 of Zaitsev, Hainsey, Riley, and Muzzin 24 to 25 minutes a night, playing the bottom pairing who he doesn't trust about 11 minutes, And at the end of the third period, these guys are
Yeah.
spent. That is the recipe for victory in the playoffs.
This is the Leafs Convo, brought to you by Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, Ontario, Canada, the Earth. I don't want to get on Leaf fans. They're our constituency. They're the people who click on our items and check us out, and I love them. I love them all, but I can't stand a lot of them either because every Leaf fan is smarter than another Leaf fan. And when we talk about things, we're just having a discussion about hockey. For some reason, the reaction is personal against, like, it's us. We're dumb or stupid for bringing something up. We're not anti anything. We're just talking. It's convo over coffee. We're having a discussion about the team that we love. Listen to it, take it for what it is, and do your thing. Mike and I are not the bane of the existence of the Maple Leafs. We want the team to win just as much as we think. Michael, when you see Tampa tonight and you've got the Leafs lined up, I know the initial reaction is, well, it's David versus Goliath. But to be honest with you, it's Goliath. It's the contemporary Goliath and potentially Goliath 2.0 whenever that Goliath wants to finally emerge as being, a dominant force. Do you get a sense tonight that maybe the Leafs will be able to give the Lightning a preview in some way, maybe over a period, over a certain span of the game, give the Lightning a preview of what's coming up in the rearview mirror in the Eastern Conference, and maybe a little bit of a reminder that the Lightning, you guys have played like you want to win a cup, you better stay the course, because if you guys hiccup, you got another blue and white team coming at you real hard.
Well, remember the second game in Tampa. They didn't dominate, but they played extremely well and won that game against the Lightning in their home building. So it is possible. And there are some people who believe, and I think this is a valid point, that the Leafs match up better against Tampa this year because Tampa is more of a talent speed team, but they have some aggressiveness as well, that they match up better with them than they match up against Boston. So I buy into that. So to your point, the thing is, the Lightning, there are going to be changes with that team this year because of the salary cap. They're not going to, they have Braden Point, who's basically the same guy in Tampa that Mitch Marner is in Toronto, in the sense that he's an RFA. He's going to expect to get paid big. They're going to have to clear salary out to sign him. There's going to be changes on that roster. They're probably going to have to move out a guy like Ryan Callahan because he's making too much and he's not as much of a contributor as he used to be, or Tyler Johnson. So, this is not going to be the same team next year. So that'll be the opportunity, and this is not going to be the same Leaf team next year, because if they fall short, if they don't win a round, I know that Travis Yost, who used to be a compatriot of mine at Hockey Buzz, who now works for TSN, put out a question, and I don't think he did it as a trollish thing. He put out a question, what is the reaction of the Leafs if they lose in the first round? And my response was, well, I would hope that they would finally decide that they need a top four defenseman like they've needed for the last couple of years. And they got Muzzin, but they're going to lose Gardner, and they're going to need that guy again. But that's the thing. It's an evolution. Teams change. And we know this is the Leafs as they are now. The deadline is passed, and can they win a round? And if they can't, then what will they do in the summer to change that?
I know what a lot of fans would like if the Leafs lose in the first round. Fire Mike Babcock, make William Nylander the captain, trade Mitch Marner for a bag of pucks. Look, a lot of fans, what they want is a goodwill showcase series between the Leafs and Lightning that we'd probably see between Frolunda and Jokerit, a ballerina dance-off. I don't know, when we're talking about the playoffs to come, why we don't draw on our experience in every other effing playoff in the history of the NHL when we project what's to come. Not every series is going to be the same. I want to see a team like Tampa go on a run, rip through the playoffs, and win in a variety of ways. But at the core of the operation, it's skill and speed, and not necessarily finesse. I mean, what kind of finesse are we talking about in the NHL? But I'd like to see them, use that core value of their game to succeed, but also draw upon other aspects to help get the job done. So we can see, as people who are hopeful that our team is going to win a Stanley Cup, we can see what it really takes. Mike, we want to talk about some of the depth signings that the Maple Leafs made over the last couple of days. Nothing too extravagant. We don't have to bill it with a ton of pomp and circumstance. But again, these are the nuts and bolts of an operation. These are the things that have to be done when you continue to build not necessarily in a sexy way, but in a way that, in a lot of ways, will pay dividends down the line.
Well, it's Kyle Dubas getting the business done that he can get done, and that, when you can get signings put in the bank, and you can clear them out of the way, you can concentrate more on the big signings that'll happen in the summer. And like you said, it was Andreas Borgman and Garrett Sparks on 1-year extensions, and Borgman might be in the mix for the top 6 next year. And we know Sparks, unless he's traded, will be probably the backup behind Freddie Anderson next year, but he'll be a UFA after that. And you have to factor in that they have a couple young goaltenders in the system, and Joseph Wall and Ian Scott, who might be in the future, that comes in a year or two after that, so they might plug the gap with a veteran guy rather than re-sign Sparks on a long-term deal. I mean, you have to look at the landscape. They signed one of their 2018 draft picks in Mac Hollowell, who's having a great year leading the OHL in defensive scoring. Now, there's a concern that he's 5'10" and 160 pounds, but there is room in the NHL for smaller, skilled defensemen. So he might be somebody who has the abilities, because of his speed and his creativity, to make the NHL in a couple of years. We'll see. The most interesting thing is not a signing as of yet, but one of my colleagues in Russia, Igor Orenko, mentioned yesterday.
Mike, one of your colleagues in Russia? Never thought I would hear you reveal one of your colleagues in Russia. How often have you and I gone on about socialism versus capitalism, and the fact you have a colleague in Russia, Mike? I honestly thought.
His name is not Leon Trotsky.
Is he not Khrushchev's great grandson?
Yeah, no, but Igor Orenko, who he's
a great guy. He does a great job for sure.
And basically, he mentioned yesterday that Igor Korshkov, the Leafs second-round pick, after Matthews in the 2016 draft, his team, Lokomotiv, is playing in, I think, the second round of the playoffs against SKA St. Petersburg. And if they lose, that Korshkov will be heading over to North America and sign with the Leafs. Now, that probably means going to the Marlies like Pierre Engvall and Carl Grunstrom did at the end of the SHL season last year. But he's a guy that we really haven't seen at any development camps, any prospect camps, any training camps at all. He's really an unknown commodity.
He's like Ivan Drago. We don't know much about him.
Kyle Dubas went over to
poor Mike. Poor you. You try to be serious here, and I'm just effing around.
He's a player that I think could be in the mix in the next year or two. But again, it's somebody we have to see to actually determine that.
Funny thing, you brought up Russia. Did you know that the Leafs are modeling their whole existence in a locomotive?
Boy, but where's the rim shot?
Would I get back on Carson with that one? Look, just to summarize here, I don't like any other team. I have no second favorite team. My kids always ask me, Mike, what's your second favorite team? What's your third favorite team? That's the way kids act. Oh, geez, you take a shot at my kid, you're banned for life. Never do it. But the thing is, I don't have any other teams. I want the Leafs to win. That's all. Honestly, that's all I really care about. And what I tell Leaf fans too is, don't get caught up in chirping with Oilers fans. I don't know. Did you see the Terry Jones tweet the other day? I'm not trying to take it. Ridiculous. Why are Canadians fans, when they travel to Edmonton, so much classier? What is it about them that we like, and that all of a sudden Habs fans, when they travel on the road, are the class of the place and so welcoming and warm-hearted, and Leaf fans are the exact opposite. I don't think the Leafs are ready to win a Stanley Cup yet. It's got to be close, Mike, because these guys are starting to come into their own. You don't want to be thinking, well, by the time Mitch Marner hits the 10-year mark, maybe we'll be able to hoist one. The way Tampa has operated, the tenacity and the veracity of which it wins games and just moves forward, is an indicator that this is Tampa's Stanley Cup to lose. If you're hoping that the team that's much better than you is going to fall apart because they've already played too well, and you've been kind of dilly-dallying through the season and think that you're just magically going to emerge as a front runner, even though you have no pedigree and no history of doing so, we got to get out of fantasy. Let's get into reality, and also keep our fingers crossed that in some way, shape, or form, the Leafs can do something miraculous and move the chains ahead and try to get this thing done before we believe they can. Last word to you, Mike.
Yeah, this week we're going to probably find out the status of Jake Gardner. Chris Johnston on Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday mentioned that they're going to see that after shutting him down for a couple weeks, whether his back is not barking as much as it used to. If it is, then he probably will get back in the lineup before the end of the season. And if it hasn't stopped, then I could see maybe season-ending surgery. Now, he didn't say that, but I have a feeling that with him going into unrestricted free agency and the back still bothering him, that he'll probably go down that road, but we'll see.
Prediction on tonight, Mike.
3-2 Leafs in overtime.
Go pour yourself a big cup of convo and try to forget the memories of our convo. I know you can't because you love it. Have a good one, buddy.
Thanks.